Guinevere sat at her teacher's feet, looking down at her own. She had no idea that Orion would be here. If she'd known, then she wouldn't have come at all. And there would have been nothing Garrett, Barso, or anyone else could have done about it. He was there. He knew what she was, and he wanted it. Perhaps even more than her father. The young woman kept her head down, listening to the men converse. It seemed that Orion wanted Garrett to steal something else for him. A book.
So, do we have a deal?
That depends. How much are you paying?
More money than the ring. Easily.
Orion coaxed. Garrett was unfazed.
I'd prefer an actual amount.
From beneath her hood, Guinevere gave a tiny grin. Garrett was nobody's fool.
All right, Garrett. How does 1,000 silvers sound?
The vast amount nearly caused Guinevere to look up when it was announced. She wasn't the only one who had been impressed.
That's 100 gold. Why are you offering so much for a simple book?
Garrett investigated.
I'm sure that's not exactly the going rate on literature these days.
I have my reasons. Reasons which I deign to discuss.
Suits me.
Grand. So we have a deal then.
Orion beamed.
Just tell me where I procure this book of yours.
Garrett snapped.
Oh yes, of course. You'll find the book inside the House of Blossoms. I have no idea where, but a very good friend of mine informed me that there is a secret passageway within Madame Zhao Zhao's quarters. I'm guessing that it might be somewhere in there.
Right. Need I ask who this very good friend of yours is?
The thief grumbled.
You wouldn't want to know.
Well, I got what I need.
Watching Garrett stand, Guinevere followed suit.
Excellent, my friend.
Orion reached out to shake Garrett's hand, a gesture which the thief blatantly refused. Lowering his outstretched hand, he looked instead to Guinevere, with a knowing, slightly disturbing twinkle in his eye.
It was a pleasure to meet you, Bethany.
Guinevere wasted no time in tailing her mentor out of that place. Once they were back within the protective walls of his sanctum, Garrett began planning instantly for his newest job. He had procured some maps of the area from Barso, in exchange for a small cut of the lucrative profits, and he was now lost in concentration.
Are you really gonna help that Orion guy?
Guinevere piped up.
The price is right.
Was all he answered her with, as Garrett continued to look over his new maps.
But you have no idea who he is, or what he's going to do with that book.
None of my business.
It should be. What if he does something awful? You'd be the one responsible.
Again, none of my business.
Aren't you worried about him slandering your reputation?
You mean the reputation I have for being the most wanted man in the city? Nope. That's about as bad of a reputation as you can get.
Garrett remarked dryly.
I see.
Guinevere crossed her arms.
So, figured out a way in yet?
She asked, deciding to change the subject. If Garrett didn't care, why should she? After all, there was little Orion could use the book for without her magic to assist. Also, she thought.
Not yet. I'm still looking.
Can I help?
No.
Why not?
The young woman continued to be persistent. Garrett finally looked up from his maps and scowled at her.
I have another lesson for you tomorrow night. You can occupy your overactive mind with that.
Guinevere leapt back.
What? Another one? But you just tested my stealth this evening on the way over to meet Orion.
Right? And not much has changed. I want you to be able to sneak up on a guard and pickpocket the bugger by the end of the week. Else I can't even think about taking you with me to the House of Blossoms.
Guinevere gasped.
You're taking me on the job? Do you think I'm ready?
She asked, hopefully.
We'll find out come the end of the week.
And what if I'm not?
Then you stay here.
But Basso said...
I know what Basso said. Forget it. In case you haven't noticed, I'm used to being completely alone. And spending every waking moment with a hyperactive kid like you is driving me insane.
Guinevere violently turned away.
I see.
She mumbled. Curling up onto her dark blue cloak, the young woman shut her eyes. Tears pricked her eyelashes as her heart once again flooded with an uncomfortable heat. Why was Garrett always so eager to push her away? She just wanted to help him. He had already helped her so much. Without his guidance, the young woman knew that she would have never known what to do, or how to get by alone within the harsh underbelly of this city. There was no argument whatsoever. Garrett had saved her life. Was it so wrong to want to repay such a debt? As her teacher continued his preparations, Guinevere wiped her eyes and tried to rest. It had been a long day, and one that she would sooner like to forget. Garrett went back to his planning, emitting a loud, frustrated sigh. He didn't usually snap like that, and it worried him to think that Guinevere was causing him to lose his self-control. The thief traced his finger over the layout of the whorehouse. The girl was just going to have to understand. He lived a life of solitude. It was the way he had always been, because it was all that he had ever known. Like two stone gargoyles, out of sight and undetected, the two rogues prepared to make their move. Their skill level was as different as their age difference. One was a master, the other a mere apprentice who showed promise. The older of the two peered down into the building they were on, surveying the scene, hunting for their coveted prize. Below the domed glass roof, he could clearly make out several hooded figures, and said prize laying on a mahogany pedestal, ripe for the taking. But there was something else down there as well. Something very unpredictable. Something very wrong. The younger thief edged forward, a look of foul arrogance and bitter defiance plastered across her spry face. Impossibly blue eyes surged through the darkness. They seemed to be eating away at those of her companion. The eldest looked at her as the midnight rain grew frigid.
You can't go down there, Aaron. It's too dangerous.
The teen gave him a mocking chortle.
For you, maybe.
No, Aaron. For anyone. What they're doing down there, it's magic. I do my best to steer clear from any of that arcane trickery. It's an ancient and extremely dangerous thing.
He explained, trying desperately to shift Aaron's train of thought. But his wise words had already been blocked out by his daring and conceited young protege.
There you go again. Same old predictable Garrett, always so reserved and cautious. Sometimes, in this line of work, you have to take risks. Big ones.
The moment the last syllable left her mouth, the thief extended his hand and slapped her. It was a quick, yet serious action. It was his last resort to try and get her to listen to reason. The look of deep fear and pleading within his weathered face emphasized this. Erin grabbed her cheek, growling in frustration.
I'm not a child anymore, Garrett, and you,
she hissed.
You will never be my father.
Her words tore away at him, wounding the thief in a place his headstrong charge could never hope to see.
Errand.
Enough talking! I'm going down there.
Before Garrett could react, Erin eased herself over the glass.
Errand, no!
He barked. But his warning came much too late. The world around him faded to an inhospitable grey. He was paralyzed, helpless. Through an impenetrable prison, Garrett could only watch as the glass began to crack all around her. And then... Garrett shot up from his mattress, drenched in a cold sweat. His breathing was heavy, and his body a trembling mess. As his vision swam into focus, he saw a very worried Guinevere kneeling beside him.
Are you all right?
She offered.
You were screaming.
Garrett caught his breath with a shout.
I'm fine.
The young woman's eyes narrowed at his ungrateful words.
Yes. I can see that you are.
She snorted.
Then what are you still doing here, Guinevere?
Garrett stared pensively at her. Guinevere noticed that his false eye was out again, and she found herself uncontrollably gawking into the empty void. Garrett noticed this, and spoke up.
What is it now?
Without thinking, she blurted out what was on her mind.
How did you lose your eye?
An electric jolt grabbed the thief by the chest. No one, not even directly after the incident, had bothered to ask him that question. But now, this spoiled, hand-fed whelp had carelessly and clumsily opened up the horrific scars, which Garrett had tried so hard to forget. The thief ground his teeth. She had no right. Initial discomfort was replaced by fury.
Don't you ever ask me that question again. Keep your nose in your own affairs.
He snapped coldly, and then abruptly looked away from her. Guinevere remained motionless upon the floorboards, watching him, feeling for him. Whatever the reason, one thing was now clear to her. It must have been awful.
I'm sorry, Garrett.
She finally spoke up.
I'll leave you alone until you call for me.
With that, the young woman returned to her place atop the stairs. Garrett sat perched in the serene blackness of his tower. He shook his head. Why did she constantly want to assist him? Why did she stare at him so? And quite possibly his biggest question, the question that still remained yet to be answered, why did she, an upper-crust lady, want anything to do with him at all? These were all questions that Garrett desperately wanted answered, although he was beginning to believe that they never would be. When he was sure that she was indeed asleep, Garrett felt the empty socket with the base of his thumb, and stood. Slinking past her now slumbering Guinevere, Garrett ascended the stairway, and propped his elbows against the window ledge. With his remaining eye, the thief looked out over the slumbering city, lost in a sea of deep contemplation. Lost in time.